Thank you for a marvelous introduction, Daniel. I'm impressed myself. I'm going to talk to you about, this is very difficult for a Latin American, what we do in 15 minutes, which is the time I think that was allotted around one of our different experiments worldwide. I will talk to you about how we saw from Latin America, my group, the Arab Spring and how it started, and come work it in 15 minutes until today. About the 17th of September 2010, in the fair city of Sidi Bouzid, Tunisia, a young man called Mohamed Bouazizi set himself on fire. He immolated. The European press picked it up as a man who had been slapped by a policewoman. His dignity had been offended, and he therefore decided to commit suicide in a very painful manner and burnt. Now, to us in Latin America, who have been for the last 40, 50 years trying to find a way of introducing one way or another inside the free markets those people who are outside, trying to beat the cultural myth that this is essentially made for Europeans, concretely Anglo-Saxons. We aren't made for markets. We are more solidarity, more sort of closed societies. This was interesting because everybody had their attention fixed in the Middle East. And it's been some time that we have been called in by various heads of state that we'd been working for, as they asked us, to find ways of introducing all this immense amount of businessmen, the Kasbah, the bazaar, so the Middle East was not unfamiliar to us. So we traveled to Sidi Bouzid and put up two teams, very small teams. One first team was 2 people, it grew to 20, including our Arab associates, and then the other team was just 2 people looking at newspapers. And what we saw was that in a space of about 2 months, about between December 2010 and about March, February 2011, 4 Middle Eastern governments fell. Now, that meant for us that something in that self-immolation had sent a message. And as Carl Gustav Jung would have said, what's the symbol? Or Claparède would have said, what's the initiator message? What was it that people were reading that other people weren't reading and that was hitting across the whole Middle East? What our newspaper division indicated is that in those 2 months, Bouazizi was not the only one to self-immolate. There were 63 other people. This is illustrated. Hopefully we'll get this printed for tomorrow. 63 other people throughout all of the Middle East in different places self-immolated. And they all had, what was interesting is you don't self-immolate discreetly. If you self-immolate, which is Joan of Arc, and it's a painful process, it's because you have something to say. And so since everybody has cell phones, we found out that everybody had actually captured on film or on record what they were saying, not only Mohamed Bouazizi, but the 63 other people. What Mohamed Bouazizi said was the poor also have the right to buy and sell. And then he set himself on flames. There wasn't among the 64, and this is now in a film that comes out in the United States, 3 times a night in public broadcasting system, which is the result of my conversations with the surviving members who tried to self-immolate, 37 who were extinguished. It's interviews over 3 years. Why did you set yourself on fire? And here is what you said. What can you now tell us since you did not actually die? And there wasn't one religious statement at the moment of dying or trying to die, and there was not one political statement. There was simply one common word through all of them, which is, I have been expropriated. And there is nothing more disgusting than being expropriated. And the second word was an Arab word called hogra, which is disdain. I am looked down under. And what had they been expropriated for was the third word, which is Ras el Mel, which means in Arabic, capital. So as far as we're concerned, when we put this on film, and a best-selling book in North Africa, in France, in French, it was essentially that the Industrial Revolution had come in to the Middle East and North Africa, and nobody was recognizing it. Maybe North Americans and Europeans, overloaded with history and the Muslim background, forgot to look at the fact that most of them wore sneakers, white socks, blue jeans, white t-shirts, and basketball jackets and short hair. What I think has happened, like in Latin America, is that our old habits of old Spain, as Western modernity came in, have actually been beat by modern European organization. So can we go to the next slide, please? There's only two of them. What we found out is that he was actually expropriated, not of his cart, as they said. That was the incident that the press took up, this cart that was full of vegetables. He was expropriated of his right to change the certificate of his house for a full title that he could have mortgaged to buy an Isuzu truck with his partners. It would have been 4. To get associated with his partners, which is to break the traditional family so he could work like Europeans and North Americans in artificial families, which is what companies was about, was also withdrawn from him. They took away the tools of him being able to get limited liability, so he had unlimited liability, and he was easy to take away. If he did not form a company, there was no way that he could bring his value to market in the form of issuing shares that he could have traded against investment. There was no way that he could use his cart and his wares to guarantee credit. And the result of it was despair, because since he was ruled by a local covenant in the 9th sector of Sidi Bouzid, there was no way that he could, like a Latin American who works in the streets of New York, say, look, this policeman doesn't like me, I'll trade my place for yours. It's a question. His wife used to be my girlfriend, so I got to move to another sector. He can't move because he doesn't have the property rights to move. That's a story of all the 64 who died within a period of 60 days in the name, basically, of Ras el Mel, capital, and free enterprise. I think we've got a third slide. All right. Now, what's the interesting part about all of this, which is what we're looking at, is that in that sector of Sidi Bouzid are all the documents that award him property rights. All the documents that have over time been copied from Europe and North America, which state in Roman legal terms what rights they have. But they're small-scale rights. If Sidi Bouzid is 38,000 inhabitants, 1/9 of that may mean that he's in a sector of 5,000. That's what the Industrial Revolution was about in Europe and the United States, going from small scale to large scale. And so what we have found out as we've gone around the Middle East and North Africa, it is that all the documents that are actually needed to testify private rights over assets are in place in the same way that they used to be in the 18th and 19th century in Europe. It's just that they're in very small circumstances, circumscriptions, in small scale. Asterix and Obelix, very small little villages. The Industrial Revolution is about how you are able to negotiate with people you don't know in terms that are universal on a large scale. That's what you Westerners began doing, and that's what globalization is about. These guys are locked in. There is no way you can divide labor, there's no way you can specialize, there's no way that you can get capital if you are in the small part. Now, we are working with at least 5 governments to try and see how it is that we can help them gradually structure the law so that it welcomes these people inside. You know, we developing countries produce a lot of laws. Peru, where I like to keep my enemies concentrated in, produces approximately 100 laws per day. 106 to be exact, 30,000 per working day, 30,000 per working year. So in that maze, all the things we do don't work. So legislation and how you do it is extremely important. But here's the part that's interesting. Looking at this and looking at the information technology, and with this I end, I don't know how far I am into the speech, but more or less, these Fidel Castro things to me. A short speech is nothing longer than about 3 hours. It's essentially this. We started saying, how do we get this message across? Because legal language is extremely complex for simple people. And yet all these simple people are able to read from an iPhone. And then we heard about a technology that was coming out in the United States, but it could be anyone, on bookkeeping, called blockchain. And so we told ourselves, now, we have the unfortunate aspect, as opposed to the Anglo-Saxons, of not having common law, because if we had had common law, the wisdom of the people would have come in through the judge-made law into our law. We don't, but we have an advantage over you with statutory law, is that we can change it real fast without going through judges. So the question is, how do you get what is written in statutes and put it in so that at that local level it can be recognized? Because every Arab government, every developing government in the world has signed the same treaties we have and have the same constitutional dispositions, which mean we worldwide have the same problems. The problem is, as Walter Lippmann, an American pundit, once said, the legal lag, the time it takes between important people at the top to dictate universal rules and for them to trickle down. So if you start thinking of what Jefferson said, Washington said, Benjamin Franklin said, and by the time it got to America, 200 years had passed. Between the Meiji Restoration and Japan, modern Japan, 90 years had passed. It takes time for the law to be applied at the lower levels, because the people who are at the lower levels are not the same guys that are at the higher level. So what we have learned to do by trying to talk to these terrible people at Silicon Valley who do not respect anybody who can't talk in binary terms, 1 0, 1 0, is how do you get the legal principles that Europe has taught us into a binary system so that you can actually connect the people at the bottom with the people at the top. So that when a mining company from Europe or an oil company from Europe comes in and finds oil and finds a Peruvian tribe, it can connect to the local social contract, which actually says the same things in different words. And so that you make them responsible where it counts. Nobody in Conga, Peru, where you have a biggest gold mine and they are not complying with international treaties, cares what you Europeans say. It's far away in Brussels. Nobody cares what it says at the cloud. Who cares about the cloud? But they care what it says at home, because that's reputation. And so the question is, how do you unite reputations? And the reply is, the internet can actually do it if we put the law into binary language. Now, this looked like something my grandchildren will follow me up on, until I read Daniel Hanna at some meeting in Tunisia, I don't know how many months ago that was, or a year, saying these Peruvians are doing interesting stuff. And I said, legislators are talking about us doing interesting stuff. I got to find a way to speak to them so that somehow or other, we who are your students and who move very easily in the Middle East, because we Peruvians look very Arab, if you haven't noticed, should connect, and out of a conference, if I walk the corridors, we might find something that we can do together. Thank you very much.